Hi guys, welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to talk about understanding interval notation, and at the same time we're also going to do kind of a review of domain and range. So let's start talking through an example. Now you see we have a line segment here, and the domain, remember domain means the x values of that particular graph. X values, we're talking about the values from left to right. Another way to say that is from west to east. Okay, left to right, west to east. That's another way to say that. And in this particular case, if we look all the way to the left, this graph is at -7. That's one of the endpoints of this particular graph is at -7. That's all the way to the left. And all the way to the right, we're at +4. So this graph, the domain of this graph goes from -7 to +4. Notice something, though. These have brackets on both sides. Brackets. Now, brackets means that the endpoints are included. So in this case, the -7 is an endpoint, and because that endpoint is closed, 7 is part of that domain. And once again, brackets mean that it's part of the domain. So on the other side, you can see the 4 is also filled in, so the 4 is also part of that graph. So the 4 is also the other end of that domain. So once again, the domain of this goes from -7 to +4, and -7 and +4 are included. They're part of that graph. Now let's look at the range. And if we remember what range means, range is the y values, and that's from the bottom of the graph to the top, the lowest point to the highest point. Another way we could look at that is south to north, okay, bottom to top. All right, in this case, the bottom, this graph bottoms out at -5, and it reaches its top at +6. Notice, once again, that the endpoints are colored in, so both those endpoints are included, so we put brackets on the end. Once again, brackets means that that number is included in the graph. So the -5 is included in the graph, and the +6 is included in the graph. So we put that all together. Our domain is from -7 to +4. And our range, bottom to top, is from -5 to +6. Domain, range, all the numbers here are in brackets because both the endpoints are included. Okay, let's look at another example. Now you notice that this graph is a little bit different. It's another segment, but if you look at the endpoints this time, they're not filled in. Okay, so that tells you something about the endpoints. The endpoints are different this time. Now we know the domain are the values from -10 all the way up to 8, because that's our west to east or left to right. It goes from -10 all the way up to 8. So our domain, but this time it looks different. Notice that parentheses at both ends, the -10 and the +8. Parentheses mean that the endpoints are not included. Okay, they're not part of the graph. Okay, and because they're not colored in, that tells us that they're not included in that graph. So once again, if we look at the -10, because it has an open endpoint, it's not included. Also, if we look at the +8, it's not included there either. So our domain is from -10 to +8, but it doesn't include -10 or +8. Let's look at the range now. Now remember, once again, the range is the lowest value to the highest value. The lowest value here is at -4. The highest value here is at 1. And once again, since the endpoints are open, we write parentheses. So the -4 is not included, the +1 is not included, and our range therefore has parentheses on both sides from bottom to top, -4, +1. So if we were to put that all together, our domain is -10 to +8 with -10 and +8 not included, and our range is -4 to +1, and both -4 and +1 are not included. Let's look at something a little bit different. Now, if you look at this, one of the endpoints is filled in, but the other one is not. So it looks like these values are included in the graph, and these values are not included. So how will we write that? Well, our domain we know is from left to right, and so that goes from -6 up to 5. Okay, we go down up here, we can see -6 to +5, and the -6 is included, but the +5 is not included. Okay, so the -5 is included because that point is colored in, but here it's not included. Okay, so there's our domain. Because the negative 6 is included, it has brackets. Because the 5 is not included, it has parentheses. Brackets means it's included. Parentheses means it's not included. Okay, so let's look at the range from the lowest value to the highest value. The lowest value is negative 4. The highest value is a positive 8. So we're going from negative 4 to positive 8. Once again, the negative 4 is included. The positive 4 is not included. So our negative 4 has brackets. Our positive 8 has parentheses. Negative 4 included. Positive 8 not included. Okay, last example. This is something a little bit more interesting, a little bit different. If you notice this graph, we have endpoints, and our left value and our right value are on those endpoints, right? Because this is as far left as we can go, and this is as far as right as we can go. So our domain is from negative 10 to positive 8. And notice the endpoints are not included, so we have parentheses. Negative 10 to positive 8, negative 10, positive 8 are not included. But this graph is a little bit different. The endpoints have nothing to do with the range here. Why? Because remember, range is from bottom to top, and our bottom is here. Okay? And, oh, look at that. Actually, the bottom here is the same as the bottom on the point. So in this case, the bottom of the graph and the endpoint are at the same. But if you look at this endpoint, well, this endpoint is definitely not the top. The top of this graph is here at positive 8. So our range is from negative 4, the bottom, to positive 8, the top. Okay, so the range does not have to be the endpoints. It can be somewhere within the graph. Now notice, guys, since this is part of the graph and there's no hollowed out space here, obviously this is included in the graph, and the same thing down here. So in this case, both the top and the bottom are included, so we have to put brackets around both. Okay, so that's interval notation. That's a review of domain and range and how to read these graphs. If you have any questions, look back through the video, come in and ask questions, and we'll be getting some homework practice on this real soon. See you later.